China's second biggest meat processing company, has just done a deal with two of our companies here. Talk to me about that.
Well, if we can get a lot more meat trade going to China, that's going to be quite positive, because so far what we've seen is a lot of where we're doing well is the dairy side of it. And in China, they don't tend to eat a lot of that sort of red meat. They tend to go for the chicken and the pork. So it's an area where there's that potential to start expanding and getting that sort of red meat that we have lots of over to China. Also a sign, I think, that the free trade agreements and the closer integration of trade between China and New Zealand is heading in that direction of helping promote our trade between the two countries too.
Although worrying news out of China this week that apparently authorities are finding melamine in the milk powder again. Murray, that's a concern for us, surely, doing trade with these guys.
Well, so long as it's not Fonterra that's putting the melamine in, I think it's someone else's problem. Who knows what happens in Chinese manufacturing, to be honest. The sort of standards that we'd have in our country and the Western world, they may not always be followed, and it's probably just going to be a fact of life that from time to time there will be found to be things. I mean, once upon a time the Germans were accused of putting antifreeze into their wine, weren't they?
Apparently so.
It could well be to some advantage to us in the sense that, one, what we did see last time after the scare was ironically, you did see the Chinese looking for sources where they could be a bit more assured of their quality. So that does play towards New Zealand exports. I think a general positive thing is at least they found it before it went out into the wider community. So they've tightened up their controls a lot, and that will probably help the standards within the industry over time.
And that sure is something that New Zealand will be able to help them with as well. The whole food safety process could be win-win for us.
Well, that's one of our strengths, is quality and safety.
Thanks, gentlemen. Coming up, the International Monetary Fund talks Turkey with their latest global growth forecasts. We find out where's the boom and the bust. So please stay with us. Welcome back, and here we go. Murray, the International Monetary Fund, putting out more statistics saying that global growth is even better than they thought it would be. Your reaction?
Well, I think what they've come out and said is that the past 3 or 4 months, the first 3 or 4 months of this year was much better than what they thought it was going to be. So they've raised their forecasts for the current 2010 year. But from here on in, next 18 months, things look to be pretty much the same as what they were before. We're rebounding out of a pretty poor 2008 and a bit of a recovery in 2009. Growth on the world stage of between 4–4.5%. It's actually quite good, but in the context of where we've come from, we shouldn't get really too excited about it.
U.S. and Canada are apparently going to drive this growth from the developed countries. What can we learn from them?
Well, I mean, they've had a really big recession in those countries, and it's part of it could just be a stock recovery out of there. The consumers really aren't out with the spending very much. I think the more interesting story though is it's actually the non-developed world that's growing. Part of the BRIC countries, the India and China, China growing 10%. Next couple of years, India 8%. That's real strong growth.
And Brazil as well, racing away apparently.
That's right. Yeah. So the 4 BRIC countries are actually doing quite well: Brazil, Russia, India, China. Asia's doing quite well. New Zealand's 3% is the forecast that we've got. It's better than where we've been in the last couple of years, but I certainly wouldn't be saying it's open the champagne bottles yet.
And they won't be opening the champagne bottles, Nick, either, over at BP. Apparently, they're still looking for somebody to come in and give them up to $10 billion for some of their assets. Where is that at?
Well, they have been looking around and see what assets they can sell off, or there's also been the rumours that they're looking for someone to buy into them as well. So obviously they need some cash. They're up for about $20 billion in terms of putting that money up to going towards some of the damages that are there and all the expenses of filling the hole as well. But their share price has actually been recovering quite a bit recently. It's up about a third. So part of that seems to be down to the talk that they will be able to comfortably raise some money so they don't have cash flow problems. And they're also having another crack at putting a big bung over the hole. And there's probably a bit of optimism that they might get close to plugging that. And of course there's been a few short sellers as well, and so now that the price has been heading up, they have to rush in and cover themselves.
Yeah, but you've got to remember the price is still way down from where it was.
Yes,
if you drop by 60 or 70% and then rise 30, you're still way below where you started from.
Yeah, so it's still...
And it really, who knows where that story is going to be. I think the people who are buying into that are pretty much speculators in my view.
Okay. Would you be buying shares, Murray?
Not in BP.
Not in BP. How about you, Nick?
Not quite at the moment. I'm an economist, so I'm a conservative person by nature.
Look at that tie. I don't know how conservative you are, sir. Now, listen, let's talk about unemployment. That's the bugbear for all economies. The OECD now tells us that there are 47 million people out of work in the 31 most developed countries in the world. Is it going to get much worse?
Look, I think we're probably, for the current cycle, we're probably about as bad as it's going to get. Clearly, unemployment is not a good story. You get the loss of production. When 10% of the population, 10% of the labour force is unemployed in some countries, you can end up with other sorts of problems. You can end up with social problems, poverty, and those sorts of things. We're not used to those levels of unemployment in the Western world, and I think as the economy grows out of the current malaise, those numbers will go down. Let's
go crystal ball gazing, gentlemen. Nick, in the week coming up, what are you going to be watching for?
Well, we have the inflation figures coming out on Friday, so that's the big domestic focus that markets have. So at the moment, it looks like inflation will come out around 1.9%, so a little change from the 2% last time. So right here, right now, looking fairly benign. And of course, there'll be the developments in Europe and the banking sector there to keep an eye out too on a more global basis.
And Murray, what will you be keeping your eye out for?
Well, it won't be the economy and finance and all the rest of it. I'm more interested in seeing whether the All Blacks can do to the Springboks this week what they did to them last week.
All right. You going to be putting any money down on that?
Maybe.
Okay, we'll see. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Well, that's all we've got time for. From the world markets to Mei Wang, from China to Timaru, all in 30 minutes. Thanks to my guests, ASB's chief economist, Nick Tuffley, and financial analyst, Murray Weatherston from Financial Focus. As for you, we love your feedback. So go to our website and drop us a line and check out my weekly blog while you're there. As we leave you, a salute to France as they celebrate Bastille Day. We'll give the last word to French President Nicolas Sarkozy, who once famously said of his own nation, "We have no purchasing power because we don't work enough. The French economy lacks fuel." Keep the faith. We'll see you next week.